We are live, so welcome to this live stream with me, Peter Sweden, and my special guest, Opinionated European. You can find her on Twitter. I'll leave the links in the description below. Thanks so much for joining. Today we'll be talking about the Labour kind of anti-Semitism crisis that has been ongoing for the last couple of weeks in the UK. We'll bring up a few facts here, and we'll come on with some opinions about these different issues that's been ongoing. So in case you're not familiar, Jeremy Corbyn is the leader of the Labour Party in the UK, and he's basically a communist. And especially in Sweden, communists kind of tend to have a problem with, they definitely have a problem with Israel, and they also have a problem with anti-Semitism as well. Quite a bit in Sweden. I'm not too familiar with the situation in the UK, but I mean, what do you think? I mean, you're living in the UK. I live in Norway now. I don't live in the UK anymore. What do you think about this whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's been all over the media now. Jeremy Corbyn being accused of being an anti-Semite and this anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And I think there are a lot of divisions within the party that are going on. I'm not going to pretend like that makes me upset. I think that, you know, it's better for our side of the culture war if the Labour Party isn't as strong as it was, if it's not gaining support. But I think it's very important to draw this very fine distinction between being anti-Israel and then being anti-Jewish, right? Because I don't think that there is that much evidence that the media has been presenting so far that you hear about of Jeremy being necessarily explicitly anti-Semitic. It's more that he's very much against the existence of Israel and supporting Palestinians and Palestinian rebels and Palestinian states. And so I think that is where the biggest misconception has been so far.
I think that's an interesting point to bring up there, the distinction between anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. I kind of see it as this way. If you know, I definitely think the Jewish people have a right to a homeland in Israel. You know, just as Swedish people have a right to a homeland in Sweden. You know, if you don't think Swedish people have a right to a homeland in Sweden, then you're anti-Swedish. And I would probably say that, and I would say the same for Israel as well. You know, obviously you can criticize policies of the Israeli government if you disagree, but I think the kind of thing we're seeing here from Labour and Jeremy Corbyn is the kind of usual communist thing that's at least been very prevalent in Sweden, but they kind of really hate Israel, and they really love these Hamas and Palestinian groups a lot for whatever reason. That's the kind of way that I see it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there has to be also another distinction between, as you said, criticizing Israel for their policies, for their laws, for violating certain international laws that we have, and then what Jeremy Corbyn is doing, which is actively endorsing and supporting all these terrorist organizations. I wrote down here some facts, and one of the things he said was he called members of the Hamas group his friends, and he was also inviting Hamas to speak in the parliament. He called them hardworking people. So it's really crossing the line of rationality in some way when you start endorsing terrorism, when you start endorsing people who murder others, who are absolutely cruel. And so I think that as a leader of a party, as leader of such a large movement in the United Kingdom, you know, he has completely crossed the line in what he has been saying and what he seems to be standing for. Yeah, so I think it's ridiculous, and I do see why people are calling him an anti-Semite, because once you start endorsing, you know, these groups that actively murder Jewish people, then the conclusion is quite easy to reach.
Yeah, no, I think I've also been looking at a few of the. I had a look at some of these There's been especially a lot of complaints in the media about these Facebook groups that Jeremy Corbyn and his followers have been part of. I actually look at some of these. It was actually quite funny. Some of these, well, funny or funny. I mean, some of the conspiracy theories. I'll just bring up some examples if you don't mind. So Jeremy Corbyn was part of some of these groups, and his son Tommy Corbyn was part of these groups as well. And let me see, I had it written down here somewhere. Yes. Tommy Corbyn, that's Jeremy Corbyn's son, and he's actually been very active in helping his father, Jeremy Corbyn, getting elected, and he's very active in the Labour Party. He was part of what they call 3 anti-Semitic Facebook groups. One site that he liked, one Facebook group he liked, was called Anti-New World Order, a news site which contained articles with examples of the following, quote, busted, Israeli IDF colonel arrested in Iraq for leading ISIS militants, and a picture of the earth with the blue star of David emblazoned over it, and a caption that read, quote, the new world of Zionism is almost here, one government, one currency, one religion, act now, unquote. So that's the kind of fate, and I had looked at some other ones, and that's the kind of general feel, kind of this Illuminati, New World Order, Zionist, conspiracy theorist kind of pages. That's the kind of feeling I get. Many of them were into. So that, I mean, obviously, I think people should have right to free speech and everything and so on. I think, and I think it's good to question things as well. I think it's good. I think it's good for people to know what kind of Facebook groups and so on these guys are into, because some of these conspiracy theory groups are a little bit nutty.
Yeah, and I think it's actually very interesting that you bring this up, because this isn't an issue that's been going on for like a year or two. It's actually something that's been there for years. And there's actually, I read an article on a 2002 post in one of those groups that you discussed, and there was a painting of supposedly Jewish men playing a board game, and there was loads of money on it. And I also think there was perhaps the Israeli flag. I don't remember. I saw it a while back, and then it was played on the backs of people, and there was like Illuminati symbols in all of this, and this big Illuminati pyramid in the back. And one of the people who was in that group asked Jeremy Corbyn, oh, do you think this should be removed? Or do you know why it's being removed? And then he said, oh, I have no idea. And people took this as endorsing this sort of conspiracy theory about how Jewish people are supposedly, you know, the Illuminati. And afterwards, this has been brought back. You know, somebody found it, and one of the Labour, I don't know if she's an MP, but I know she's part of the Labour Party. I know this woman, she started tweeting at him and asking him about it, and then he ended up apologizing. But I still think that somebody who is so high in the ranks, so somebody who is a public person like this, has to be very careful in regards to what they say and the content that they publish online. And so, you know, it wasn't just irresponsible, it was rather very stupid for him to not to be so careful. And also, you know, the fact that he has made a comment like this, knowing that this was an art piece that had anti-Semitic aspects to it, is another thing that is worrying. And you know, it just points at certain evidence as to why people are calling him anti-Semitic, or somebody with anti-Semitic sentiments.
Yeah, no, I think that mural that you mentioned is the thing that got this whole row started as well, and then it spiraled into different other things. They discovered these Facebook groups. I think in particular it was this one guy on Facebook who was actually a candidate as a councillor for Labour here in, I think it's like they have an election in a month or something. And there was a guy, Alan Bull, I think his name was, a candidate for councillor for Labour. And he posted an article on Facebook questioning the Holocaust. And he was suspended, but then I forgot her name. Yeah, the head of the Labour Party disputes panel sent an email asking for him to be reinstated. And she is also on the Labour NEC as well. And after this emerged, she quickly resigned and was actually replaced by Eddie Izzard, which was I don't really know what to say about him, but that's that's kind of the thing that got this whole started off, I think.
Yeah, and I heard of that. And also, there has been actually 20 Labour Party officials who were in those anti-Semitic Facebook groups. And no, I don't know if it was the same groups that Jeremy Corbyn and his son were involved in, but over 20 of them were in some sort of anti-Semitic Facebook groups closed or restricted groups as well. So that also makes you think. I mean, if it was a public page, then perhaps it wouldn't be so it wouldn't raise so many questions. But just because they were private pages or pages that had restricted access, it makes you think, okay, what were these people posting there? And once the media actually found it, they this is the exact things that they came across, these posts that make you think, wow, there is something that is really wrong with the Labour Party, especially because a lot of Jewish communities are part of the Labour Party. And so I'm surprised that they will be so careless in regards to the things they say online about the Jewish community.
That's the thing I find actually a bit strange, because if you look at how Jewish people often vote, they often vote for Labour Party. In America, they often vote for Democrats. So it's kind of strange that they would attack kind of the people that actually vote for them. That's the thing that's really strange to me. And yeah, I really don't get it. I really don't get these communists, how they think. I mean, it's you often talk about.
But you see, this is interesting because there are connections to other things that are happening in the Labour Party as well. This whole feminist debate, for example. What should feminists support? What should feminists stand for? There are so many divisions in that party that are coming to life more and more, that it just makes me feel that in a few months, unless the Labour Party pulls itself together, which I don't really pray for, the movement really will suffer even more, because they're pushing people aside. There are these very extreme left-wing views within the party that are clashing with this more moderate left-wing thought. And so it's becoming really problematic. On one hand, Labour wants equality. On the other, there are Labour officials who are calling for like, for example, Diane Abbott, she was calling for there being constituencies where only Black people can run, or people of color. So it really shows how how extreme the Labour Party is in so many of their opinions and views. And I think that is really alienating people, because most of I think that majority of the population is rather moderate in their views, whether they're on the right or on the left, right? And then of course we have extremes. But it seems that the Labour Party has really radicalized over the last couple of years, especially under leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, who, as you said, is a socialist, if not a communist. And so I think that unless the party really picks itself up and starts to cater to a larger amount of people, rather than playing this game of identity politics, then I don't really see a future for that party in British government.
The thing that worries me a bit, though, when you see all of the establishment, the media and everything attacking Corbyn all the time, the thing that might happen is actually a backlash, that people will actually go to support Labour instead. You saw the same way with Trump. All of the media and establishment was attacking Trump nonstop, and you saw a backlash, and people voted for Trump just in spite. That's the thing that kind of worries me a bit with the Labour Party, that might actually happening. I don't know. Only time will tell. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't want what's her name, Diane Abbott, as Home Secretary in the UK. That would be quite something.
Yeah, no, I mean, it would just be crazy. That woman, the amount of things she said, the fact that she still has her position, the fact that when there was this anti-racism parade in London a few weeks ago, she was one of the main speakers, a woman who said, oh, let's discriminate against this race. It's really upsetting. And this whole PC nature of the Labour Party, I do think that for a lot of people, it's pushing them away. But on the other hand, you do make a good point that, oh yeah, what if people vote for him because he's so anti-establishment? I think that the reason why the Labour Party did so well in the elections called by Theresa May was that a lot of people saw him as this opposition to the establishment, like Trump was seen in the United States, just on the left. But the way he dressed, the way he spoke, he wasn't part of the elites. And I think that's what a lot of people wanted. But perhaps with this leftist populism, it has sort of lost its momentum. I don't think that it is as convincing and as powerful as it was a couple of months ago. So hopefully, I mean, time will tell, as you said, but let's pray that Labour does in fact decrease in their power.
Yeah, hopefully. And I mean, it's a tough question for me, really, because then you think of the alternative, Theresa May and the Tories, or you have, one side you have Theresa May, Amber Rudd, and then you have another side, Jeremy Corbyn, Diane Abbott. I mean, like, hello, what kind of choice is this? It's the most, you can't choose between them, really. They're all just as bad, in my opinion. You really need another alternative.
Precisely. I am part of the Tory Society on my campus. I actually I tried running for secretary of the society, and I didn't get elected because I was too conservative. And the step that I've taken too far was the fact that I believe in free speech. Absolutely. And that I wanted to invite speakers who were controversial. I said, why not have Lauren Southern? Why not have this and that person? But to all these people, it was way too conservative. I was a Nazi by then, and a racist and whatever else. Even though debate, even though I wanted, some sort of a discussion happening, I wasn't just, if I was to invite, for example, let's say somebody more controversial like Tommy Robinson, right? I proposed, why don't we have a debate? Why don't we have him debate some Muslim YouTuber? Get some free speech going on. How else are we supposed to make up our minds? But people just judge. No, you're too right wing. And I think that this also relates to our conversation now, that we have softened the meaning of many very important words. Words like racist. If you're against immigration, you're immediately a racist. Words like Nazi. If you're against open borders, you're a Nazi. And then, if you're pro free speech, and then perhaps when you start criticizing Israel, you're labeled an anti-Semite. I think that it's really problematic when we start using words that have very strong meaning in this very light, easy way. They start losing, their origin. They start really not meaning much when they're being overused. And I think that is something that is really upsetting in this whole conversation, that we're softening these very key words.
Yeah, no, I agree. The left has been really engaging the last couple of years in using racist, Nazi, and whatever to just label their opposition as the evil guys. But really, when you see the thing that really comes to mind when I see all of this thing happening with the Labour Party is, blame your opponent for that of which you yourself are guilty of. I believe it was actually Goebbels that came up with that phrase. But that's really what the Labour Party is doing. These far left people, they call the right racist, Nazi, all these kinds of words. But in reality, it's actually the far left themselves that are the actual hateful ones. They are the ones that are actually, hating on people and are quite authoritarian. And if they ever came to the power, we would see another dictatorship in the West.
Absolutely. And I have to say, it's quite funny how, traditionally you would look at this extreme alt-right to talk about hating of being anti-Semitic or hating Jews. Whereas now you see this also reflected on the alt-left, this extreme left, like we see within certain people in the Labour Party. And so I think it makes you really think a lot about the nature of political ideology and just how similar this communism and fascism is at the end of the day. And, this is something that I have myself been saying, and I'm sure you have as well, that it's really, those movements are very similar at the end of the day when you start comparing them. Both are organized along the lines of identity politics, oh, our race, oh, our religion, oh, our this and that. And I think that, the more I look into those movements, the more they start resembling one another.
Yeah, no, you have this, what's it called, the horseshoe theory, where they say they come meet together at the same point. I know many people will object to that, but I kind of, more and more as I've seen, it kind of seems to be quite true. Obviously Nazis and communists aren't the same in all ways, but they are similar in other ways. They are authoritarian. They really don't like Israel very much. The Nazis, well, they probably like white people, but they hate black people. The communists, on the other hand, they they like black people, but they hate white people. So they're kind of are the same, but in a few different ways. That's the kind of thing that I've been seeing from the communists and the Nazis when I've been studying what they believe in, and you really see that with the labor people. Many of what these labor people have been saying in these Facebook groups, it's really hard to see any different between that and what have you. Some of these Nazis, Nick Griffin, David Duke. It's really hard to see the difference between what they are saying and what these labor people are saying in some of these Facebook posts I've been seeing.
Yeah, precisely. And maybe this is also something I could do on my YouTube channel, and maybe you could be a guest as well to talk about this, and then insert the photos and what they're discussing afterwards, just so people also have a view, because it really is very expressively anti-Semitic content, which is worrying. Because if labor now starts hating Jews, then how long before it will start hating on Christians, right? Because obviously the Christians are the privileged ones, the Christians are the majority, so they're the oppressors. And I think that it's just step by step going to get worse and worse. But what's interesting is that where I live, at my halls at university, there is a lot of I have some Jewish friends who are supporters of the Labour Party and huge supporters of Jeremy Corbyn. And so I wonder how they will react to those accusations. I wonder if people are willing to take a step back and reconcile. Wow, okay, this man is actually saying things that I completely disagree with. I can't support him anymore. Perhaps I will look for another party, or will they be blindly supporting what he stands for in the Labour Party and just completely ignore proof, even if they're demonstrated with it. It's similar sort of with gender pay gap, right? You can tell feminists, you can show them that no, gender pay gap doesn't exist, but they will still believe in it. And so
it's like logic doesn't exist.
How people react.
Yeah, it's like logic doesn't exist really for these people. Yeah, I think I actually had a talking about the Facebook post, by the way. I actually had a quote here that I found. One Facebook post from a guy called Stuart Walsh said that the Tory party is controlled by the Zionist lobby. What part I don't understand. I mean, if they want to critique Zionism, I mean, again, that's one thing, but it's really kind of an underlying thing that I see with all of the things going on here. And you mentioned earlier that that they will start going after Christians, and that's the thing that's actually really worrying, because I can definitely see that happening. That's you saw the British police, they asked Lauren Southern if she was a quote Christian extremist. Hello. And the Swedish government now, actually, after Brittany and Laura were banned from the UK, the Swedish government actually wants to do the same thing openly. So they said that they want to ban Muslim hate preachers, and they want to ban Christian extremists, and they want to ban far-right extremists from coming into Sweden. And I even want the EU to put up a list of unwanted people from coming in to the EU. And this is after Lauren and Brittany were banned. So this is like, yeah, this looks like a good idea. Maybe we should just copy this and start doing this ourselves.
Yeah, no, it's just, it's actually very insane. And I feel like you can be just as hateful, but as long as you're on the left, then nobody cares. And actually, talking about Christians, it actually reminds me when Count Dankula was sentenced, when the verdict was that he was guilty. I was actually looking at some case law because I'm a law student, and I was just like, oh, okay, why don't I use my knowledge to find out a little bit more about this? And the video they were banned for when they were distributing these leaflets about Allah. Yeah. And what's interesting is that they were distributing these leaflets, and then all these people were so outraged, and they were showing homophobic attitudes, right? Because they were offended by that. And then it's funny because nothing was done to these people. Nothing was done to, them expressing this homophobic attitude. But then there were people in the UK in the past who were sent to prison or Christians who were sent to prisons for distributing leaflets saying homosexuality is a sin. And, whether you believe that or not, that's a different thing. But from a biblical perspective, a purely biblical perspective, homosexual acts are a sin. You know what I mean? So
Oh yeah, definitely.
it's just completely crazy that you can go to prison for something like that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I actually saw, you mentioned that I actually saw a video on YouTube. I don't know if you saw that. There was a video on YouTube of a Christian preacher. I think it was in Scotland. I think it was in Scotland. Or maybe it was somewhere in the UK. I think it was an American preacher who had come to the UK, and I actually think it was in London, if I'm not mistaken. Somewhere in the UK, anyway. And he was preaching, saying that homosexuality was a sin, and the police actually came and arrested him on the spot for saying that in the streets. And then you kind of see what Lauren did and these other people, and then it was actually Lauren that was that was banned. So it seems like a very double standard, a very big double standard.
What is that media company called? Vice? It's Vice, right?
Vice News, yeah.
Yeah, they wrote an article titled "Jesus was gay" or "Jesus was a homosexual man" or something, and then nobody did anything about it, right? People, it's obviously that's not the story of Jesus. It's completely made up, but nobody took offense and nobody went and started attacking the Vice headquarters, and they didn't have to pay any penalties, and there was no legal action taken against them. But when it's done, for the other major religions, then it's a problem. And it is upsetting because it is a double standard. I think we should all be equal under the law. We should all be treated equally. And when you start implementing when you start relying on prosecutorial discretion and just allowing the prosecutor to decide when do we prosecute and when do we not prosecute, you're starting to enter this very slippery slope where, where do you start drawing the line? What will these people have to say about Christianity and our faith before, the police takes action?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing in the UK very much. I probably think the police at the higher levels up are very much infiltrated by leftists and leftists really, who have a double standard. They think one thing is acceptable, but then when some other people that they don't like do the same thing, then they can arrest them. Because actually there was I saw something about I think it was an opera piece or something, a theater in the UK doing a play where they portrayed Jesus as a homosexual. And there was actually a Christian group that reported it for hate speech, I think, or something of the kind. And the police actually said, no, this is just fine. It's just free speech.
Yeah, because British law, you're allowed to ridicule a religion and you're allowed to make fun of it and stuff like that. But clearly the interpretation is now changing.
But not if you criticize a certain...
Yeah, if you're found grossly offensive, you're out. So it's a worrying precedent that we're seeing set in this country.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's yeah, I mean, to think about that, talking about double standards, by the way, right-wingers, conservatives, they get banned off Facebook and Twitter all the time for saying the smallest thing wrong. But then you actually had this Corbyn that's actually one thing I thought of that no one has talked about. These Facebook groups, they haven't been banned. If all this leftists talking about praising Hitler and saying that the Holocaust didn't happen and so on, they haven't been banned. But if a right-winger would have said the same thing, that would definitely be banned straight away. So again, you see the hypocrisy, double standards there as well.
Absolutely, and the media, the mainstream media, the trash media, haven't even went and said that Corbyn is a Nazi or a racist. They didn't call him that. When there were independence marches in Poland, and they were recording people march and saying, nationalist songs and being proud of their country, their heritage, they were all called Nazis and fascists. And then you have a person, who's the leader of a major party in the United Kingdom, the opposition leader, and he says these things and participates in these groups, and nobody is doing anything about it other than, writing a few articles about, anti-Semitic attitudes in the Labour Party. But then when it comes to name calling and using these words that are supposed to silence you and shame you into not saying what you actually think, then, we're going to leave the left, we're just use it against the right.
Yeah, no, it's, no, I completely agree. It's you mentioned the Poland march there. I actually thought of something when you mentioned. Do you know what the Swedish justice minister said about the Poland marches?
No, but I would love to find out.
He said that he actually tweeted about this. I think I have a screenshot somewhere, but he tweeted a link to this march in Poland, and he wrote that we are seeing the resurgence of extreme nationalism again, and we have to fight it. And that is the Swedish Justice Minister, Morgan Johansson.
It's crazy, but didn't they also say that like Swedish people have no culture and?
Oh yeah. Sweden. I think I said yeah. They actually appointed for the guy to what was it called? They have a national heritage board, where they are working to preserve the Swedish culture and heritage. And I actually appointed a Pakistani migrant to lead that board, and he's actually admitted that he doesn't know anything about Swedish culture at all. He doesn't really know that much about it, and they just appoint him to preserve the Swedish culture. That's probably going to work out well.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And actually, I in my law classes, we have this property class, and we learn about the theory of property and how do we own things. And one discussion was about museums. And now imagine in a class of 20 people, I was the only person who said that museums are good. Everyone else thought that they were sources of colonial oppression. And we were actually talking about how, when you bring something from, let's say, Aborigines cultures to share with people in the West, to show what these other cultures have achieved and wrote about and believed, and to educate us about difference in the world. They said that that's problematic because the plaques on which the information about that particular artifact is written by Western scholars who have actually studied that culture for years. But the argument was that, they'll never understand it because they're foreign. Meanwhile, in Sweden, they do, the exact opposite. But what's funny as well, just going back to Sweden, I was reading an article about the countries that are supposedly the best democracies and have the most freedom of press. Sweden was first or second, I think, in terms of freedom of press, which is so crazy because so many people on the right are just being silenced or completely excluded from society or lose all of their friends because they, for example, criticize migration policy. So who is writing these things? I mean, it's leftists writing reports on leftists.
Well, you have freedom of the press in Sweden as long as you as long as you say the right things. 80% of the Swedish media is owned by the same family, so I guess they can say pretty much what they want.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. So hopefully that same thing won't happen in the UK.
You really don't get a very, the left always talks about diversity and equality all the time, but you really don't get that much. They really don't seem to care that much about diversity of opinion or diversity of news sources or things like that. That seems to fly straight over their head. Or they completely ignore it. Yeah, no, I think, how long do you want to go on? I think we've been going for almost half an hour here. Is there anything else you would like to add on this topic about Jeremy Corbyn and so on? I think we covered quite a lot of it. Is there anything else? Oh, there's one thing I would like to ask you, by the way. I just remembered. I mean, you're Polish, and the Polish people, you suffered under the Nazis first, and then you suffered under the communists. Both of them killed millions of Polish people. What's your what do you think when you see, what do you think when you see all of this resurgence of communism in the West?
Yeah, I mean, the Polish people as a people were always against implementation of communism. I mean, we fought a war, the Polish Bolshevik War, 1920, 1921, which we actually won and took a lot of land from the Russians. But it really breaks my heart. I remember my grandma telling me when I was a kid about how when she used to go to school, they asked them to write an essay about the Second World War. And her father went all the way from Leningrad to Berlin during that war. So she wrote what he told her. And he was actually sent to prison for 9 months for what she wrote, because it was against the Russians. It said that the Soviet armies came through the country, they raped, they murdered, yada yada yada, and writing about that was not allowed. So even my mom always says how she was taught wrong history, how she was taught untruthful history, and only, you know, after communism fell and she could learn and read again, she discovered how much was actually hidden from the people. And I think that growing up, and a lot of people in Poland growing up being told these stories and being told how they couldn't say anything, how neighbors would spy on neighbors and then report to the people's militia, which was like the equivalent of the police back then, and how you know, people risked everything to fight for their freedom during the revolution. So I think that because our parents didn't have those freedoms, and because we grew up being told about how difficult it was, that we appreciate the rights that we have so much more than people in the West, who, you know, were never behind the Iron Curtain, who experienced the pleasures of capitalism, and also the way we were raised just as children. You know, we were never raised under this idea of the Peter Pan generation. You know, there was, you know, my mom was always fairly strict. I had to study when I had to study. I had to, you know, do my chores before the pleasure. And I think that it's very turned around in the West. And I think we're raising this generation of kids who don't take responsibility for what they do and don't understand the repercussions of losing their rights. So I presume that's really where the difference is, and why I appreciate freedom of speech so deeply.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's kind of flipped. The West is becoming what what the Soviets were before, and the East, the Polish and Hungary, are becoming what the West was. You know, it's flipping around. But I think Norway is actually a little bit in what you said there. People learn about what happened in the past. Actually, Norway is a little bit more like that, which is why I think they still have more freedom of speech in Norway, because the Norway were occupied under Nazis, and they get taught about that in school all the time. So
beautiful history they can be proud of. I mean, you know, fighting and resisting the Nazis, it's something to tell your children as well. You know, they couldn't say what they wanted. They were occupied, same with Poland. And so I suppose that there is that intersection.
Yeah, they actually teach in Norwegian school, you know, when the Nazis occupied Norway, you weren't allowed to fly the Norwegian flag at all, and you weren't allowed to sing the Norwegian national anthem. But you would think if the Nazis were that nationalistic, they should have allowed the Norwegians to have their own flag and song, but apparently no. But it's actually quite nice to see now on actually yesterday, on 1st of April, all of the like houses around this area, all of them, they all put up the Norwegian flag on their flagpoles. I've never seen anything like that in the UK or Sweden, actually. It's just everywhere. I drove past a small village. It was like 5 houses in that small village, and 4 out of 5 had a Norwegian flagpole flying in there. It's like literally everywhere a Norwegian flag now. So that's quite a difference to see that here. They seem to take more pride in freedoms than other countries, but I don't teach too much about it, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think that healthy amount of nationalism and patriotism and loving your country and your culture, there is nothing wrong with that, and, you know, feeling connected to your roots. But I suppose, you know, as we see with this rise in a lot of very extremely right movements, I don't stop criticizing them. And I think that although a lot of people on the very extreme right fight for free speech because they are the ones that are being silenced, I think we can never ignore the fact that we should also be able to criticize them, being on, you know, more moderate conservatives. So I love freedom of speech. Just love freedom of speech.
Yeah, no, it's a really important thing. And by the way, do you mind if I read a super chat here, by the way, before we finish the stream? It's actually quite a good question here from Dynamic Frog, £2 super chat. Thank you so much. He asks, opinion on Israel dumping their migrants in Europe. I don't know if you saw that, but there was some news out here just a few hours ago that Israel was supposed to deport 16,000 African migrants back to Africa, but they actually reached a deal with the UN to actually send those migrants to the West instead, to Germany and Canada. So he asks opinions on that.
Is this really true? Is this a checked fact?
It is true. Yes, it is true. It's reported in the news here a couple of hours ago. they were supposed to send these 16,000 migrants, deport them out back to Africa, but instead the UN comes in and says the UN Refugee Agency comes in and takes them into the West instead.
You see, I think that the steps that Europe is taking is really self-destructive, and whether you think that there should be, you know, whether you think that multiculturalism is good or bad is another debate. But we see that so many of the migrants that we have today are not integrated properly. Not many speak English, especially the ones who came within the past couple of years. We have problems with growing unemployment. We have seen a rise in sexual assaults in countries like Germany and Sweden, and so before we're able to, how can we take, you know, more refugees before we're able to integrate and the ones that we have already and help them assimilate into the culture here? I think that it's very irresponsible what they're doing. I think it's quite absurd, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, no, it's I think when it comes to Israel, I think they're doing the right thing. You know, they got 16,000 illegal migrants in their country. They want to deport them. I think they should have all right to deport them. They should go back to Africa. But then the UN comes in and says, no, we'll take them into the West instead. Come on in. I'm going to say I'm going to say Israel is doing the right thing here. They don't want them there. They're getting rid of them. And but then the UN comes in. So no, you don't have to send them back to Africa. We'll just take them in here in the West instead. I mean, hello.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, you know, the United States deports illegal immigrants. Why does Europe not do the same? And I think that the UN doesn't realize that what they're doing is actually causing a completely opposite reaction than the one they're expecting. Look at what happened in Italy and with all the very conservative parties winning. Why? Because people are scared, because people are tired, because the country doesn't have enough money to take care of all the migrants that are coming in. And so I think the UN thinks, oh, we'll just all live together in peace and happiness. But actually what happens is that a lot of the people, the people who have the right to choose to vote, who lived in Italy for hundreds of years, you know, those families, they will oppose what's happening. It's different when you accept some people actually running away from war. You accept asylum seekers, people who want to integrate. If you have enough jobs to give to them, if you actually have a system that works well at integrating people into your society. But then you create these places, these completely isolated ghettos. Like in the UK, what is that? There is this town that I don't remember the name of. It's like Blackburn or Blackthorn, and it's 80% Muslim, for example, completely unintegrated, and it's just a ghetto. So you know, you have like a country within a country. It's really problematic.
It's the backlash. People don't like what they see, and then because I think it was actually a survey saying that 70% of Europeans see the migration as a threat, and you know, you're seeing it in Sweden as well. The Swedish Democrats, which are against mass migration, they are definitely going to do very well this upcoming election. I'm guessing that they might actually win it. That's my gut feeling. At least second place, for sure. So you're really seeing a backlash. People don't really don't like the change that I see around them, and that's kind of how I got started. I mean, I was in Sweden back in 2014, and I remember I went to the shopping mall, and all of a sudden, it wasn't really what it used to be like. All of a sudden, I would see these people, you know, with 4 wives and 10 kids in tow, just walking around the shopping center. I'm like, okay, hello, this is what I expected. So yeah.
Yeah, there's actually been, you know, after so many refugees came to Germany, where they were a lot of them were located in southeast on the border with Poland, and I come from a small town right on the border. It was a city that used to be German, and then it was divided because the border is on the Odra River. I don't know what it's called in English. And so the city was split in two, and there's a lot of migrants who live there, and there have been multiple attacks that were reported on the Polish border by those migrants, because for some reason there is this hate of these Catholics on that other side. So there's been a huge rise in the report of attacks, and you know, it just really makes you think about why are people having this backlash? Why are people scared of bringing migrants in who we don't have the resources to integrate? I don't only think that it's harmful to Europe, but I also think it's harmful to those migrants.
Yeah, no,
You're taking
definitely.
these young people from their land and then bringing them here, not giving them opportunities, not helping them integrate, but often leaving them on social welfare or in those ghettos. So I think we just don't know how to deal with this, and bringing more migrants in is not the answer.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the thing that's happening in Sweden. The integration is not working out as they expected, and then you have these people forming separate groups into no-go zones, criminal gangs, and so on, and it just goes downhill from there. That's really what's happening. It's taking too many people at the same time. I think it was actually a survey in Sweden. It showed that when a certain area has more than 5% migrants, then the white people start moving out in Sweden, to fleeing to whiter areas, if you will. And then when that happens, they get even more migrants in the same area, and then they don't integrate, and it doesn't work out. So
also a rise in anti-Semitism, isn't there? Like there's Jewish people reporting running away from their cities and their towns. And
yeah, there was actually the synagogue in Gothenburg was firebombed with petrol bombs a couple of months ago. And this comes after the police stations have been blown up, and all kinds of mess in Sweden. So yeah, no, it doesn't work very well. And I also have another super chat here, by the way, a nice one from Grant Johnston. Thank you so much. It says, "Keep up the good work, both of you." So that goes to you as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Excellent. Yeah, I think we're going for about 45 minutes now. I think. What do you say? Do you think we should wrap this up, or is there anything more you want to touch on?
Yeah, no, that's really everything I had to say. If I could just encourage people to subscribe to my YouTube channel, it's also Opinionated European, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely go and subscribe to her on her YouTube channel and Twitter account as well. I'll leave the descriptions in the comment section below after this video has finished, so you can find her. So make sure and go and subscribe to her as well. And yeah, thank you so much for coming, and hopefully we'll have you back on shortly.
Thank you so much for having me on. Bye, guys. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, thank you so much for watching, everyone, and we'll see you later.